Ladies, gentlemen, Monday night, 8 p.m. You're joining Michael, SILJIC, STEVAN, BUBALO, the heavy hitters. Guys, Novak news coming on now. Guys, Michael, how are you going? How are you?
Doing well, working remotely.
Excellent. Always productive, as I know you to be. Guys, tonight we've got a really good episode for you. Michael and I are obviously on the front lines here on the Northern Beaches of buying and selling real estate. We're going to give you our idea of what we think is a crystal ball and what's coming on. But let's get started, Michael. Let's talk about 2021. Like, what an interesting year. In your opinion, we had different surges in the different markets. Where do you think it all started in 2021?
Well, really, most of 2021, pretty much across the ballpark, it all took off for all property. But I'd definitely say it was that housing market that definitely started pushing first. And as we found the affordability start to struggle there with a lot of people to get into it, that's when we found that unit market started to do that secondary run more towards the end of the year.
If you thought like in regards to timing, like months, that would have been, what do you think, like March, April, May?
Yeah,
right?
I'd say that's probably where way to move. Yeah, correct, where it all started. And I found, that boom really lasted for a good 6 months up until around November. And that's when, I'm curious to see your opinion, but that's where I found at my end, it definitely started to taper off as we led into that Christmas time. Yeah.
Oh, mate, I agree with you. 100%. And I don't think we didn't really feel it in the apartments at that time. Definitely, like, the houses were surging. We were probably feeling it in the townhouses. We weren't feeling it in the 3-bedroom apartments. On my take, I think we started feeling it in the apartments probably around June or July, maybe even August. Towards the end of the year, we saw that surge translate into the apartment market.
It was a 50% increase for property prices with houses. Like, it was such a massive increase. And then apartments, as a rough estimate across the board, would have been about 30% as well. So it was just really, really big increases. And what we found was a lot of people were starting to get priced out of the market. And towards the end of last year, I found it wasn't really any major external factor. It was just the market started to fatigue. Like any booming market, it eventually has to come to an end. And that's where I found personally it started to hit that level there where at the end of the year it probably came off maybe 5% or so. But it was more about just basically people being able to now enter the market, and it wasn't as hot as what it was before.
There's always going to be that slight minor correction, and people use the word correction thinking the market's going to go down, but it's really just, I like to say, the cream off the top. That's all. We've reached a new level and we're going to sit there. The apartments that we saw, Michael, like the 3 bedrooms, the 2s, the 1s, everything kind of fed on the way down, didn't it? Like, we saw good activity in the 3, feed the 2s, and the 2-bedroom sales, then feed the 1s.
Correct. Your take. Because what I found is obviously generally your more luxe stock or your unique stock always tends to perform strongly. And like you said, that sort of trickles down as well, where in a struggling market, let's say your traditional 2-bedroom and DIY, 2-bed, 1-bath, 1-car will tend to struggle a little bit because there might be a little bit of an oversupply of it. Where what we found was in this hot market, everything was moving up so much that even those traditionally probably oversupplied type units, even they had quite strong growth as well, where 2-bedders maybe before were selling 700,000-800,000, were selling 900 mil, 1.1, 1.2.
Yeah. And we saw this surge continue, well up until the end of the year, but then around that kind of Christmas period, which is normally traditionally we see really, really strong market, transactions were still occurring, but we definitely felt a change in buyers' attitudes out there. What do you think you attributed to that? I'll give my take, but
well, definitely from everyone I was speaking, this is not just real estate related. This is more an overarching concept. But I found that most people I was speaking to across every industry, because 2021 obviously for property was such a roller coaster of a year, but then for a lot of people in every industry, it was such a roller coaster. Everyone was just over it that I was speaking to. So whether it was real estate related or personal related, everyone was just literally ready to shut shop, start maybe focus on family, focus on something else. And what I found was that's what tends to people sort of just push it aside. So look, we'll deal with it next year.
I mean, I agree with you completely. Like you know me, I got 3 kids. Everyone that I know, it's family focused, and we, you know, needed breaks. Our partners needed breaks. Our wives needed breaks, and we all, had a nice summer. So the big question, for tonight is, what does 2022 hold for us? How have you found buyer activity now that we've come back? I mean, you obviously were quite busy. You worked all the way through the Christmas period. But how are you finding buyer activity now? And let's talk about maybe some of the buyers that we are seeing out there, how they might differentiate from the buyer activity we saw last year. How are you finding, firstly, buyer inquiry rates and numbers coming through your properties, Michael?
So inquiry rates have been very strong across the board. Pretty much every property is getting, like, especially over the Christmas period as well. I think Mark's alluded to this in the past, but basically over that sort of Christmas period, December, even early January, is some of the strongest performing for realestate.com in terms of the numbers that they get, and the amount of inquiries that come through, because everyone's got the time. So inquiries have been really, really strong. And what I found is it's been a lot of people researching the market, especially over that Christmas and early January. It's people that have gone, okay, new year, time to look into buying something for myself, whether it's upsize, downsize, whatever it might be. But everyone's starting to do that research. And because of that, the numbers have actually been quite strong. So over Christmas, New Year's, probably a little bit quieter. People through open homes, because we were open all the way through, still showing. But now what we found is definitely those numbers have started to increase, probably about 2-fold from what it was at the end of last year.
Yeah, wow. I'd agree. I must admit that on the majority of the properties that I've shown, I would say I've got probably a 70% strike rate of people researching the market. That would tell me, based on, previous data, that we are probably going to see a surge in the market. So when I've seen it like this, is you've got a lot of buyers that maybe didn't feel the heat of last year's market, and they might act a little bit more, relaxed, not well, let me put it, without the same sense of urgency as we saw perhaps last year. But as the buying temperature increases with those buyers, and they all get to the point where they're ready to make decisions, that market could turn pretty rapidly. So I think if you're a buyer, right now is a good window to get into something before that super competitive kind of mindset sets in.
100%. If you're a buyer, and if you're at the buyer at the end of last year as well, like let's say you're looking from June onwards last year and you still haven't bought, you'd see now that the sentiment's completely different out there. And now, in my opinion, is a great buying opportunity because there isn't as much of that sort of FOMO, that fear of missing out that buyers had before, where the honest truth is on the Northern Beaches market, if you're paying a fair price for a property, you're getting a good deal as opposed to overpaying. There's no real massive bargains on the Northern Beaches. You pay for what you get is the truth of it. So if you can find a fair property at a fair price, you're doing well. It's a long-term transaction anyway.
Yeah. No, I agree. Have you noticed any properties like your houses, your more premium ends, your entry levels, apartments that you've seen had maybe a stronger reaction to buyer activity over the past several weeks, Michael?
Yeah, definitely your entry level homes. So what I've found is that sort of, or what used to be maybe mid ones, which now tends to be high ones, low twos. Your entry level housing market in Northern Beaches still tends to be the strongest performer. And I think it's just that age-old concept. People just want a land bank. If you can stretch yourself that little bit more to at least get yourself into a block of land, have an older home, maybe renovate it, but more of a long-term sort of strategy for people. People still definitely want to get into that housing market. So I still found they're probably one of the strongest performers. Yeah,
right. Well, look, interesting. Predictions on this year? What do you think your market growth is going to be?
I reckon...
No one's got the crystal ball.
Anyway, I reckon it's going to be pretty close to 0 to 5% across the board. Okay, I reckon we're going to have a very turbulent year. I think we're going to have some ups and we're going to have some downs. But when you look at it right at the very tail end of it, I reckon overall it's going to be pretty neutral. And that's my 2 cents worth. Some people probably agree, others will disagree. But the reason why is, and whether it makes no intuitive sense, but every time we seem to have a COVID spike, the market seems to go hot over the past 2 years. Like as we've had certain periods, whether it's causation or correlation, whether it just happens to be at the same time, but whenever we seem to have COVID hitting the news more, property prices tend to go up. Why that happens, there's probably a lot of different reasons behind it, but that seems to be happening at the moment. What happened? Yeah.
Sorry, buddy. No. I was going to say one thing I'd say is that with such a rapid growth in capital value, like in property prices, we haven't seen the rental cycle catch up. And I think this is going to be a big year for rental property, real estate, residential, commercial. We're already seeing it. There's big numbers coming through and big inquiry rates on commercial real estate. So I think there's still big gains to be made, on that side of property. I think you're probably right. I think maybe a 5% growth market, which is a pretty standard growth period for us, is what lies ahead, which is okay.
Very true, isn't it? We look at 5% after being conditioned by the market the past couple of years as being modest and poor performing. Yet, when you're talking 5% on a $200,000 home, it's still $100,000.
Yeah, that's right. So, mate, I think we'll do well. Michael, any tips for your buyers that are out there today, maybe buying or people that are coming through open homes that maybe aren't as urgent as, aren't feeling the urgency that other buyers have seen? Anything we could recommend to them to help them get into a buying position?
I think at the moment, the best thing you can be doing is speaking to a good broker, because obviously with all the speculations in terms of with interest rate changes looming sort of around the corner and what that might mean in terms of potentially the changing cash rate, but irregardless of whether the cash rate changes, whether banks are going to start putting up your interest rates or not. I think now is definitely interest rates are as low as it pretty much can be in terms of a lot of people from getting their loans. And I think now is a great time that if you are in a position to buy, start speaking to your brokers, see what you can actually afford and start to see if you can get some decent deals locked in with your banks. Because I think now is the time to take advantage of it before that potentially changes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, good advice. Really good advice. I would also say that, look, if you're a seller and you're thinking that that buyer cycle is going to change later in the year, it's a very good time to be on the market. We were going to talk a little bit more about the stock levels. When we say stock levels, we mean the number of properties that are for sale right now across the Northern Beaches. We were both talking earlier. We don't think traditionally Australia Day, I don't know who made up the rule, but that was that launch date where we would see.
It's all the real estate agents on holiday.
Yeah, that's right. Everyone's coming back. All properties coming back to market. But we've seen a slight increase, but pretty much whatever's coming on has been sold. I don't think we've seen a build up in property prices, stock levels. Forecasting the rest of the year, I think it's going to be a pretty stable year. I don't think there's going to be a mad rush on the market out there either. Michael.
Yeah, I agree. And you sort of alluded to it before in terms of a big year for rents as well. I think sort of tying in from that interest rate discussion, I think also you're correct there where rents just sort of feeding off the back of obviously property prices being pushed up so much, potentially pricing certain people out of the market, which would push people into the rental market as well, sort of pushing that up a little bit. But on top of that, if your investors, if their holding costs of property going up as well with interest rates going up, I think that's sort of a double whammy, and it's sort of going to feed into investors when they can trying to put up their rents to cover those extra costs.
Yeah, that's true.
As well. So I think, it will definitely be interesting to see what happens on that rental space as well. And then almost off the flip side of that, once you start getting pushed as a renter, if your rents start going up too much, you go, well, interest rates are cheap, and see if you can jump in there and back into the property market. And the cycle continues.
Well, you're right. It's just this seesaw, isn't it? You've got all these tenants that came out last year, took advantage of the low rates. They didn't buy because the market surged, and now they're going to come back out of that buying cycle into the rental cycle through here. Michael, a couple quick questions. Why should someone buy on the Northern Beaches? What's your personal opinion on why somebody should buy property on the Northern Beaches?
To live or for an investment?
You know what? Both. Let's do both. To live.
Okay.
Let's start with to live.
Well, to live first is very obvious. It's the best place in the world to live.
Yeah.
So obviously the nice thing about, I'll tie both into the same sort of answer, but the nice thing about the Northern Beaches market is the reason why people want to live here is the same reason why you want to invest here. We are predominantly a lifestyle-based market. It's not like we're reliant on big shopping centres being even really that central to the city in comparison to like other places that have a train line that push there. Our public transport isn't amazing. But what we have going for us is that lifestyle-based in terms of we're still within that close proximity within the city, give or take an hour, depending where you are on the beaches or less. But then on top of that, the fact that it's predominantly families that live here. We overall haven't been developed nowhere near as much as other parts of Sydney. So overall, the stock levels, there's only a limited amount of stock on the Northern Beaches, and obviously a lot of people wanting to move here. So I think long term, there's still a lot more growth to go. You look at us compared to the eastern suburbs, we're definitely much cheaper than what they are. And outside of proximity to the city, there's obviously, in my opinion, not too many major differences. Yeah. So I think there's a few fundamental factors there that point in that direction. Obviously, it is definitely more expensive as well compared to other areas of Sydney, but that's driven by the supply and the demand.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think a big factor for us, I mean, I'd live here all day, every day. It's a great place to raise your kids. We both enjoy, going out on the weekend. You get a coffee, you can go out with your mates, you can get a drink anywhere that's on the water. It's fantastic. But a factor that I would say that you just harped on, Michael, as well, is that, really when you look at the development and the development potential of the Northern Beaches, the upshot isn't as big as you think. And I think that there's a few target areas. If you're talking houses, it may be Terry Hills, Belrose, Ingleside for the future, but outside of those three kind of areas or regions, there's not a whole lot. And I think if you're talking apartments, you and I know well, obviously Brookvale's probably something that's targeted. You'll see over 55s, I think maybe creeping a little bit north, like Narrabeen, Mona Vale, Newport. But aside from that, there's not going to be a lot of opportunity. So I think good time to buy is in a market that, doesn't have massive growth projected over the next probably 15 years and great lifestyle as well.
Well, that's the thing. Like long-term, Northern Beaches has always been a very safe investment. We haven't been like certain areas that maybe have boomed ludicrously so for sort of overarched hype, and we've never busted as much as well. We've always been relatively consistent performer. And from what I can see, there's no fundamental reasons why that's going to be changing over the next 10, 20, 30, 50 years. Yeah.
So pretty safe to say, Michael, if we had a crystal ball, which we don't, but if we did, Northern Beaches real estate, good place to keep your money, good place to buy a property, good place to raise a family, good place to enjoy your lifestyle. And for those key reasons, I think it's safe to say we both agree that, there's good things ahead, for the Northern Beaches market, and the ceiling probably hasn't been reached. Yeah.
No, I agree. I'm sold. I'm staying here.
Done. Guys, I think that pretty much brings us to an end. Everyone, thank you for viewing. Again, if you've got any property questions, I'm here. Michael, my colleague SILJIC is here as well. The team at Novak Properties. Give us a buzz. Again, you don't need to be on the Northern Beaches. You don't even have to be in Sydney. If there's anything we can answer for you regarding real estate, building, development, renting, anything, please do. The guys would love to help you. Michael,
thanks, guys.
Good seeing you again, mate. We'll catch up soon as well.
Sounds good. Cheers.
Have a good night. Bye, guys.
You too.